Hello, romance lovers. Today I have a story for you called Obsessed Male Protagonist Made Me the Main Character. Don't forget to support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new interesting stories. Thank you for watching. The brave knight Lexi found himself a meter away from the threat. Behind him stood a huge dragon which could literally destroy a man in a second with just its breath. And although it was all just a shoot for the girl, looking directly at the spectacle from the side, it was a long-awaited scene. The role had to be played to the end. The main character of this story found herself in a book she had never read. She simply fell asleep while eating tangerines on her day off and woke up in some unfamiliar prison. What was happening around? Where the girl was, she did not immediately understand. Only after opening the book, the system notified the heroine that the girl was now in the book, confronting the evil dragon. It all sounded too crazy to believe in such reality. It turned out that the very book that was found serves as a guide for the reincarnated girl, since the textbook itself is the author of the novel. The system understood that the girl who ended up in an alien world had not read this story, but there was no need to panic since the book wanted to help the girl. Now the lady was informed that she had been reborn as a character in a story about confronting an evil dragon. The character's name was Tracy Is, and her adventures would last until the end of the novel. All that was left was to accept all these drastic changes, and no matter how much the lady wanted it, she would never be able to return home. In addition, she was informed that the protagonist had already arrived to save the girl. The first thing the girl needed to remember was that the only way to return was to become the perfect Tracy. This girl's role was to save Lexi. When the evil dragon died, the protagonist's mortal wound would be healed, Tracy would die, and the reincarnated one would return to her world. But at the moment when the knight said goodbye to life, the girl was in incredible pain. She did not want to love him, because these feelings would not lead to anything good. Miss only needed to play love from afar, but even so, the girl simply could not let the brave man die. She gathered her strength to heal the wounded guy. Only Lexi himself did not ask to be healed. At the same time, the countdown began. 10, 9, 3, 2, 1. The end. A second later, the radiating light went out, and the body leaving for the sky was only able to say one last thing. I will miss you. This is what the real main character of this story wanted to say. After that, the task was completed. But there is one problem at the end, so we should go back to the beginning. It would seem that although the girl said goodbye to life, after a couple of hours, she still opened her eyes. As soon as the lady came to, she still could not move her eyes. But looking around, she noticed the already familiar image of Lexi. What happiness that this beautiful man found the lady. Together with the mister, his assistant, guard Gregory, entered the office. As soon as the young man noticed the find, the surviving savior, he immediately called other employees for help. What are you standing there for? Get her out of there! The senior knight immediately ordered his colleagues. Despite all this, Milady still couldn't understand what was going on, why everyone around was talking about some survivor and trying to save her. Only by looking around did the heroine notice that she was now among the bodies that had left this life. But now Tracy was safe. The knight reported that the South remained the South. The corpses had begun to rot, although not even a day had passed. It turned out that their brigade was already too late. They had found only one living person. Their dragon was very dangerous, but something didn't add up in Tracy's head. They had already defeated the dragon a few hours ago. Tracy understood that she needed to figure everything out. Since she had met Lexi, she wouldn't be returning to her world anyway. Everything had been done according to the book's advice, but something had gone wrong. Originally, they were supposed to meet at the slave market. If the girl had ended up at the crash site, their meeting would have happened a little earlier than the plot intended. Now, for some reason, Tracy went back in time and began to see a scene she had never seen before. After a series of horrific events, the lady needed some rest. Now she was safe, and Duke Lexi was next to her. But the miss still had the question of what happened to the evil dragon, which is why she decided to ask her interlocutor. First of all, at that moment, Lexi decided to apologize for coming so late. But the girl herself did not need an apology. She returned to the past, so the guy does not remember anything. Only the noble woman was thinking about now. At the same time, the main character of this story noticed a slight change in the young man's character. There was blood on the noblewoman's cheek, but when the young man found out that it was not her wound, he seemed to sigh with relief. Lexi had never been so indifferent to Miss before. The situation seemed to be at a standstill, but then the princess remembered that she still had one advantage. At any moment, the lady could turn to a book for advice. So a couple of hours later, when the girl came to her senses, she decided to ask the guy if they had found a book in the place where the bodies of the victims were. Only the hero answered that there were no books there. The situation was gaining more and more momentum. This book had not disappeared since the moment Miss woke up. How could it not be there at all? It always appeared, no matter how much the girl tried to get rid of it. In addition, the lady was also very dizzy. And another thing that was quite suspicious was that the guy knew the girl's name. Tracy is a minor character in confronting the evil dragon. She is the last living descendant of the Wise line. She is a girl who loves the main character Lexi but can't be with him. At the end of the novel, she sacrifices herself to save him. Initially, the reincarnated lady thought that it would be enough to simply play the role, but she fell in love with a man. It got better. At first, she tried to get rid of the book, but the textbook still appeared nearby. And over time, the young lady realized that she simply could not change the original story, no matter how hard she tried. The book punished her if the lady tried to escape. But what should she do now if there are no more clues around? How did all this happen? How many questions arose in the heroine at that moment? But no one could give her answers to all these tormenting questions. It seemed that a little more time passed before the lady opened her eyes again after her latest fainting spell. At that moment, the girl was greeted warmly by Margarita, the princess's personal servant. The maid told her that the lamp she had brought had gone out, but in order not to frighten her mistress if she woke up in the dark, the maid brought oil. Although it was not that dark, the maid remembered how the Duke had said to watch the light because the lady was afraid of the dark. In fact, the heroine began to fear the dark only because she was locked in that room for 3 days after the disaster. The strange thing is that if he found the lady that day, then how could Mr. Spare know about her fear? This was another inexplicable question. At that moment, the princess learned that it turns out she had slept for 3 whole days straight. Afterwards, the girl immediately asked if it was the 9th of June today, and decided to ask about Princess Sandra's debut. The maid told her that she had heard that Ben had started yesterday. It wasn't even that the aristocrat wanted to attend this event. Sandra Adam Wexler is the only princess of the Empire and the main character of the novel, who stayed with Lexi until the very end. They were close as children, but over time they grew apart, and the most important day of their reunion was June 8th, 408, her debut. The girl, reborn as a heroine from the book, knew that this story would not begin at all if these two heroes did not meet. This whole situation now began to frighten Tracy even more. Was she really stuck here forever? Panny did not understand at all how this could happen. The girl felt unwell just from the thought of the tangled fate, so she needed to get some fresh air. Now her body was fine, but still the lady needed to be alone. As soon as she went out into the yard, she continued to actively think about her next steps, because everything had become even more tangled. During her walk, Tracy accidentally met Gregory, the knight. Gregory Adam is the illegitimate son of the Emperor's younger brother, Alexis Wexler. His eyes are emerald green, a color unique to the ruling family. He was recognized as a member of the imperial family late at the age of 5 or 6. He often spent time with Sandra and became close to Lexi until his father died due to treason. And as he got older, his life went downhill. Alcohol, gambling, women. The guy took on everything without any hesitation. When the boys met again, the first thing they did was greet each other nicely. That day, Gregory also couldn't keep his mouth shut and made a very pleasant compliment to the young lady. At that moment, Gregory felt so awkward that she simply couldn't respond to his outburst. "Did you really bite your tongue? Were you surprised that I approached her so abruptly?" The guy immediately got scared and asked her not to tell the master about it. Otherwise, he would definitely kill his subordinate if he found out. At that moment, the guy mentioned, as if the girl did not understand at all what situation she was in. Since the lady really did not fully understand what was happening now, this was the perfect chance for her to find out everything personally from the guard. Tracy thought that everything was over, but she came back, and the past is very different from what she experienced. That is why the lady wanted to understand what was going on here more than anyone else. Despite all this, it seems that only this beauty was worried in this situation. Gregory, in turn, only laughed at how the Count did not explain anything to his companion. The knight thought that there was something really wrong with this young man, since he hadn't told him anything. The guy even noted that the only thing one could get from the imperial air was a headache, although the knight himself thought that he and the man had known each other for a long time. Then Gregory explained that Duke Lexi Spare was the guardian of the North. What would happen if he led the army south without the permission of the imperial family? It was tantamount to treason. Even a fragile girl would have a hard time guessing that. It turned out that Lexi came to Gregory with a group of knights and said that he needed permission because the Iz tribe would be attacked. Luckily, the warrior was able to explain everything and organize a search party. To be honest, Gregory did not even want to remember it. The master insisted that he should not rush, so the knight could not simply refuse. The Count pointed out that they needed to find someone and dragged the commander along with him. But the heroine didn't understand how to understand all the information. Did Lexi really know everything? Besides, the knight said that he gave the man his place when they found the girl together, and then the gentleman began to court the beauty. That's why Gregory guessed that Lexi was looking for Tracy. Imagine Tracy's surprise at what she heard. The girl initially thought that her personal maid Margarita was courting her, but it was the Duke who was next to the miss while she was in a coma. He immediately stopped searching when the guys found the young lady and never left her side. After hearing this, everything became even more confusing in Tracy's head. The girl simply did not understand how the Count even found out about the tragedy in the Iz tribe, and for what purpose he was looking for her. All the actions of this man are too different from the original plot, but the lady didn't even have time to think about it. Literally, a second later, the Duke himself joined the conversation. The man began by expressing his surprise that the girl was not there when he woke up. Then he checked the forehead of his interlocutor for fever and was very happy when the girl admitted that she felt fine. In addition, the young man also initially thought that Gregory personally invited the girl to this meeting, but the girl made it clear to him that she simply got lost while walking around the castle grounds. Unfortunately, the lady did not get to hear more information about Lexi that day, as she wanted. As soon as the gentleman himself joined them, he offered the girl his hand to lead her back to the palace. On the way home, the heroine noticed how beautiful the flowers were here. They smelled wonderful too. At the same time, Lexi pointed out that in the north, these plants are even more beautiful. The girl will be able to find more flowers if she wants to go there. Besides, the guy was simply sure that she will like them very much. Only this confidence slightly frightened the young lady. At that moment, she decided to ask His Majesty directly why he had such an opinion about the lady. But the man did not answer her question, but only asked Tracy to call her simply by her first name, without formal addresses. At such moments, the main character of this story, the girl reincarnated as Tracy, tried to simply not attach much meaning to his words, because she would start to worry. After all, she never called him by a simple form of his name in her past life. Tracy was not allowed to do such things. However, that day the man still insisted that the lady calmly address him as you every time. I am me, and you are you, and I want you to call me Lexi, can't you? He asked in a questioning tone, gently stroking the girl's cheek with his hand. In that moment, the princess lost control of her heart again, just looking into the young man's eyes. She had so many questions. How did he find her among the mountains of corpses? And why did he know her name? However, Tracy simply could not interrupt this moment, his smile, by directly asking questions of this nature. Above all, the girl wanted this happiness to last a little longer. Then the commander also admitted that he was very worried when the lady lost consciousness. The man apologized again for allegedly coming too late. In addition, despite the fact that the young people were seeing each other for the first time, there was a reason why the guy allowed them to call him by name and apologize. It's simple. Lexi fell in love at first sight. But this sounded absolutely impossible, because according to the plot, only Tracy was supposed to fall in love. At that moment, the aristocrat was so scared that she could not hide the emotion of fear on her face. Of course, her interlocutor noticed the girl's fear, so he simply asked her not to run away, noting that he was not asking for an answer to his feelings, but simply wanted to be honest. It all seemed more like a dream. The heroine could not accept the fact that a young man could love her. Besides, the book had previously indicated that the characters in the book do not have their own will. Everything is controlled by the plot. People do not have an ego. They say what they have to. Even she who got here by chance was limited by this. As soon as you strayed from the course, the original would harshly return you back. Can a character in a book act of his own free will? Yes, of course. Lexi could feel some sympathy for the rescued girl. It is obvious that meeting Sandra will show his true feelings. That is why the lady simply cannot rush to answer, so as not to hurt herself even more. The search party that investigated the crash site returned to the capital on the last day of the banquet. That same day, Lady Tracy's chief maid, Margarita, helped her choose a wonderful outfit. The dress on the aristocrat looked truly magnificent. It takes your breath away just looking at this lady. Now it was time to send the young lady to the princess's debut. At that moment, the girl thought that even if she went, Lexi would still be the princess's partner. It seemed that the reborn girl even blamed herself to some extent, considering her joy at the display of a man's feelings stupid. In any case, one cannot make a mistake. Last night, he and the Count had another conversation. Then the guy gave the girl a ring, but it was no ordinary piece of jewelry. It was a tool that would change the color of her hair. If anyone found out that Tracy was the last they would come after her. That's why the knight asked her to be careful and not reveal herself. The girl also noted that the emperor, first of all, would be able to tell the royal family about this. But the man himself did not want this, just uninhabited, so that they could use the girl. The guy is really well acquainted with the cruelty of the ruling family, so he worries about Tracy, who is always gloomy. Worries about the last in this world. Let's return to the present. There were only a few minutes left before the girl was forced to go to a social event. The maid Margarita noticed her mistress's increased anxiety, so she assumed that the lady was not feeling well. But she had to lie in order to go to the ball after that. Prince Gregory met the girl near the carriage. The guy immediately noticed the lady's image today. He even noted out loud that this dress made another person out of the aristocrat. In addition, he really thought how much black hair suited her. Miss was generally surprised to meet this man here. It was a kind of surprise. Gregory came to take a guest to the banquet. The lady may have been a little upset, as she had been eager to see another fellow instead of the young knight. But as expected, it seemed that the emperor's son Spare had gone straight to the banquet hall himself. As soon as the boys got into the carriage and set off, the knight expressed his suspicions that Lexi was not the type of person who would worry about random girls. But in order not to touch on this topic, in response, the interlocutor only asked him not to create misunderstandings between the Duke and her. The girl said that the gentleman simply felt sorry for her because she had lost everything in one day. But Gregory's intuition told him that there was no misunderstanding here. Unfortunately, the knight again did not have time to explain everything he had meant, because the guys had already arrived. Upon arrival, the lady met with the Duke. At that moment, Gregory himself began to say goodbye to the guys, which was extremely strange because in theory, the knight was supposed to be Tracy's partner for this banquet. It was obvious that Lexi would be Sandra's partner, but the man quickly dispelled his companion's assumptions. It was Lexi Spare who would accompany the young lady on this questionnaire. At this point, the reincarnated girl really seemed to have lost her understanding of the whole situation. In the romance book, the plot involved the crown prince becoming the princess's partner by order of the emperor. Was this time any different? And the only question is, can the princess do as she pleases? The original story is becoming more and more distorted. Even the scene where the main characters unite has changed. Maybe Tracy should leave right now. Although when the heroine tried to prove to her unexpected partner that it would be better for the guy to be at the event with Sandra, he did not want to hear such things from Miss. "I will go only with you, Tracy, and only then will I be happy," the man pointed out, turning to face his companion in order to tenderly kiss her hands. Could the girl refuse if he asked so much? That day, the boys really became partners. They danced together, which attracted the attention of the other guests. The aristocrats were surprised who was the lady next to the Duke, whom they had not seen before. At the same time, from the outside, it seemed that the relationship between the young people was truly close, and therefore one could assume that the girl was his lover. They continued to dance, although Tracy had no talent for this art. The lady kept accidentally trampling the man's feet, but he only responded calmly to this, even jokingly telling her to step on as much as she liked. Even in such a rather sweet moment, the lady still couldn't get the thought out of her head about why everything had changed so much. The girl clearly stated that she needed to find the book, although part of her wanted to forget about the original. At that very moment, the arrival of those very guests of honor was announced at the ball. Crown Prince Kronos Adam Wexler and Princess Sandra Adam Wexler had arrived. That very main heroine of the book was here, the incredible beauty Sandra. In addition, Sandra's brother was not in a good mood today, because instead of her sister, the Emperor had chosen a mysterious woman as his companion. Despite the controversial and tense situation at the same time, it was time to greet Crown Prince Adam Wexler, who was worth a lot. But Sandra was the one who felt ashamed most of all. The lady even decided to apologize to Sir Lexi. "I wouldn't have created so many problems if I'd known that you already had a partner," the girl thought sadly. Although her brother believed that the little girl was innocent and vice versa, and it was the Count who should ask her for forgiveness. At the same time, Kronos pointed out the lack of manners of the Emperor's companion. The lady seemed to have no manners at all, and did not even raise her head while they were talking to her. When Tracy finally looked at the arrogant Emperor, he noticed how plain his appearance was, even more ordinary than he thought. And although the guy was quite aesthetically pleasing, he expressed his dislike for a girl he barely knew. To some extent, the young man could be understood. After all, the representative of the family had rejected his sister for another woman, but Lexi wasn't about to subject his companion to public humiliation. He immediately decided to explain that Tracy, especially for him, was a person who had been his partner from the very beginning. The man also ordered his interlocutor not to treat her so disrespectfully anymore. The Crown Prince was so angry that he even intended to direct his anger towards the girl, and even raised his hand towards the lady in order to feel her true nature. But the Emperor did not allow the princess to be drained of strength, so he forcibly restrained the insolent guest's intentions. The meeting was indeed not the most pleasant. Therefore, before leaving, the Emperor congratulated Princess Sandra and stated that he had still not recovered from the long journey, thus arguing his reason for leaving. In fact, it is certainly impossible to just leave at such events. Besides, the king had no business at the moment. However, he left the ball on purpose, only because of the anxious state of his companion. Lexi had initially noticed how his chosen one was trembling. The lady explained her fear by saying that she was meeting members of the imperial family for the first time, but the prince did not want to believe it at all. His eyes showed that he saw through the lady's lies. Perhaps Lexi knew something, and yet the girl was forced to explain that she did not know that the princess wanted to become a knight's partner. Now the lady herself realized that because of her, the Duke had problems, although the man himself told the lady not to worry about anything because he wanted to dance with Tracy from the very beginning. At that moment, Sir once again confirmed that it was love at first sight. It seems that the main character of this story was in absolute confusion. Tracy was not sure when exactly Sandra's feelings returned, but every word of the guy made the girl happy in its own way. It was a good thing the social event took place in the dark because it was getting dark outside. The Duke would have immediately understood his interlocutor's feelings if it had been lighter. Tonight, for the first time, he became Tracy's ally. The princess's debut ended. The imperial family continued to call Lexi, who decided to go to the disaster site on his own. He was originally supposed to return north, but the capital announced the complete destruction of Yiez. People were horrified when they heard about the tragedy that the evil dragon had caused. So the Duke was very busy, and Tracy was spending her time peacefully in the mansion, where she was taken care of. By the way, they never found the book. The only thing the girl could do was wait for the night to return. Miss was really worried that she would not be able to return to her homeworld now. Every night she could only fall asleep after the man came home. But the aristocrat understood that the situation was still difficult, so she had to endure and wait. In turn, the Duke walked loudly past her room every time to announce his return. Only to the sound of his steps could the girl fall asleep. Based on this, Miss was truly sure that she was only to blame for falling into such an obvious trap. On an ordinary day, something unexpected happened. One of the servants informed Lady Tracy that the Duke had sent a letter. The maid reported that the young man had asked her to read the message and reply immediately. "Don't sit in the mansion. Let's go for a walk together outside," was written on the piece of paper, although the lady thought that the Duke was still busy. Tracy did nothing but worry about stupid things, not suspecting anything at all. And when the lady came to the meeting, she saw in front of her absolutely not the one she expected. Are you serious? You came after the first letter? Logos, Kronos asked with a grin. It was obvious that this was a setup by the crown prince. Moreover, it was a trap not only for the empress, but also for the maid. No matter how obvious the mess was, the lady was already in the unpleasant man's office. There was nothing left to do but listen to everything for which he had actually called the lady. Tracy was so focused on her daily peaceful life that she forgot how many enemies Lexi had. And among them, Kronos feared him the most. And the young lady herself became easy prey. As soon as the guest came closer to the crown prince, she greeted the youngest lion of the empire according to all the rules of etiquette. However, the guy immediately noted out loud the disappointed look of his guest. In addition, he added that Gregory said that the girl was a distant relative of Lexi. First of all, the gentleman was interested in the question of where this lady had lived before. These questions did not surprise the heroine at all, because in a past life they had said the same thing. The lady had no problem admitting that she lived in the South. Memories came flooding back when Tracy met him. In the past, the imperial family found out that this girl was a representative of the Wise clan and further limited Lexi's abilities. The heir of a rare race that possesses special abilities, the last of her kind. When the main character of the book stubbornly rejected everything and tried to hide the lady, he was thrown into a fight with countless monsters. Tracy learned about this and surrendered herself to the imperial family. There, she faced many difficulties that she had never known. But at the same time, the girl always just smiled when she saw Lexi. So he found out about everything, far from immediately. But will they really have to go through the horror that was in the original again? Tracy deserved at least a little happiness, as the girl who was reborn as a heroine believed. The conversation with the unpleasant guy continued. He saw how much the guest was shaking. Kronos himself understood that this situation could be considered very unusual. But the guy was not going to let Tracy speak. As soon as the girl tried to answer, he simply covered her mouth with his hand and offered to use her right to remain silent. The guy imagined himself to be the center of the universe so much that at that moment he even allowed the lady's behavior to be considered too impudent and therefore hit the girl right in the face. Initially, the prince did not think it right that the lady imagined herself to be a duchess of a special kind, only because a drop of their blood flows in her. The man could not contain his anger, not understanding how the lady dared to insult his family, and was about to throw her in prison. Meanwhile, in Lexi's castle, Knight Gregory told the chief that the letter he had received was a trick by Kronos. To be honest, Lexi himself knew this, which is why he was going to ask the brave knight for help. At the same time, the poor girl has already found herself shackled by the chains of a cruel family. It seems as if the defenseless heroine has met her end. In the dungeons where no light penetrates, Tracy would plunge into real horror. But this is not typical for the reborn lady, who is not going to give up. The girl is simply tired of imitating this image. The young lady played her part even in response to injustice. Everything was strange from the start. The maid was clumsy for a reason, and Tracy was so smug that she focused only on Lexi. If she could get everything back, she wouldn't leave him alone because she couldn't stand to see the injustice anymore. The girl endured only because she hoped to return to her world, all because of this hope. But now she can't be sure of anything. At the very least, the book never appeared. And the main character of this story now doesn't even know if she wants to come back if she has the chance. After all, without the reference book, there are no more plot points for the lady. While the young princess was suffering in the dungeon, lost in her thoughts, she suddenly heard a noise behind the door. Initially, the lady assumed that it was Kronos who had returned with bad intentions. But how happy the girl was when she saw Gregory. The guy immediately explained that he had come here to free the lady. He also asked about the girl's condition. It turned out that she would no longer be able to get up on her own. But everything had been thought out. So the knight even brought a stretcher. But at that moment, the lady had only one question. Where is Lexi now? Gregory had to inform the girl that the guy was not in the capital now. The knight told how Kronos blackmailed him with Tracy and sent him to fight monsters to get Nox. Nox is an incredible value, a treasure that can take over anything you want. In other words, the heart of monsters. The situation was indeed on the verge of disaster. However, to calm the girl down, the knight immediately explained that the lady herself had done nothing wrong and that only that bastard was to blame. The Duke was indeed in great danger now, and the princess could only hope and pray that he would be okay. Several hours passed. The girl was taken home and examined in detail. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries, but now the young lady should avoid stress. All the servants of the palace were so afraid for their mistress that they now insistently asked her not to go anywhere alone anymore. If anything was needed, the noblewoman would have to call Margarita immediately. Only the second maid, who brought that damn letter from the mister, tried in every way that day to pretend that nothing terrible had happened. As soon as the positive state of health was confirmed, the maid even thought about leaving. But the mistress decided to detain her. In fact, if this had happened to Tracy in the past, she would have definitely forgiven everything. But not a real girl. The first thing the mistress did was tell Margarita that she should not leave alone. From that moment on, the maid was seriously scared and began to deny everything that poured out of the boss's mouth. The girl pointed her finger at the slave and admitted that it was this girl who brought her to the crown prince. In addition, she gave her a letter and said that it was from the duke, and then left her alone in the palace. It seemed that Margarita did not even want to listen to the junior employee. She immediately ordered the other servants to throw her in the dungeon and find out all the details. After the girl was taken away, the personal assistant decided to ask the lady if she had left a letter. But unfortunately, it turned out that they took it. Even despite what happened to the heroine, Tracy is not very worried about her safety. At least Margarita certainly believes her. Last time, only this girl was always next to Mrs. Is. That evening, the heroine also decided to inquire about how things were going with the Duke. Margarita reported that she had sent a letter and he should return soon, which clearly pleased the girl. Literally at that very moment, a strange noise was heard from the castle. A second later, His Majesty appeared in the palace, and not in the best shape. There were many scratches on his cheek, and scarlet blood was dripping from his lip. The man was going to visit the doctor's room first, but as soon as he saw his miss, he simply could not pass by her. Their embrace was so strong, as if the young people had not seen each other for several years. And although the man urgently needed to go to the doctor, everything was fine with him. So far, everything was fine with his Tracy. Lexi was really scared, because he thought that Miss had simply disappeared. At such a difficult moment, falling from helplessness, the guy still insisted that the girl not heal him. But did this really mean that this young man also returned in time? Looking at her beloved, the heroine simply could not helplessly watch his pain and do nothing. Of course, the lady instantly gave all her efforts to restore the man's health. At that very moment, that very book literally appeared out of nowhere in the center of the room. How wonderful that finally the clues will be with the holy heroine. The only thing that confused the girl was that for some reason the cover had become a different color. Without thinking twice, Tracy decided to quickly go to her room and check something. When she went to the sleeping quarters and made sure that no one was around, she opened the book and read a few details of the plot. Instantly, various texts started popping up on notification windows about the reset taking longer than expected. The history was being loaded in real time in emergency mode. There were still interferences, nothing worked. The system also notified that the protagonist had deviated from the course by changing the settings. In the final result, the book reported that the main character was not found at all. Lexi Spare can no longer be the main character, the settings have been changed. The main character of the story was not found, and now a reset is required. Since the girl did not fully understand what was happening now, she decided to ask the guide of the novel why she herself was still inside the book. But the girl literally received nothing in response. The textbook only repeated that it did not understand such questions. I definitely reached the end. Why do I stay in the book? Zrenia, bedная dama попросила, почти плача. But the system still did not think to answer her question, pretending as if it did not understand what the girl was talking about. All the book kept saying was that since the ending of Tracy had been changed, the story had to start over. The new protagonist of confronting the evil dragon was Tracy Is, and she would be the one who had to defeat the evil dragon instead of Lexi Spur. Now the reincarnated girl was not only the main character of this whole complicated story, but also the first character of the fictional world. In addition, the evil dragon became stronger than before. The main character was strengthened. A secret skill was blocked in him. The lady herself didn't like the change in the plot so much that the girl simply refused to believe this nonsense. At the very least, all this was a broken promise. Only the book calmly informed that this sometimes happens and it is called a restart, although there is no sense in it. Everything really seemed to lose its meaning in the eyes of the reborn aristocrat. The plot she had gone through simply disappeared. Only at that moment, when the guide confirmed that Lexi had deviated from the course and lost the role of the main character, the girl began to think about the fact that this guy could also be a traveler. The only one who can reset history and go back to the beginning is a traveler. But the system assured that Lexi Spare is not a traveler, so that person simply could not do it. So the Duke didn't go back in time, but then why is he acting so strange? Is this his new role? Now the girl was just waiting for this guy to wake up and explain everything that was happening. The system was unable to explain the knight's role due to its privacy settings. In addition, due to the fact that Tracy became the main character, her rights were lowered, which is why the girl will no longer be able to watch the final part of the novel. Instead of this running teaser system, it will provide the plot in parts. The traveler can act at his own will, as long as it does not violate the plot of the announcement. The protagonist can change the course of events by receiving approval, but in this case, a penalty will be imposed. At that moment, the lady realized that if the conversation turned to fines at all, then the story would definitely not develop the way she wanted. Later, Tracy, as if nothing had happened, joined Lexi for breakfast. Even during the meal, the boy and girl could not help but recall the day when the Count had previously asked his companion not to get into danger anymore. "I am ready to endure it myself, but not to look at how much pain you are in," the young man admitted that day. Now the knight assumed he would be a little late for dinner. It turned out he had business to attend to before returning north. But as soon as the lady heard this, she immediately stood up from under the table in emotion, immediately demanding that the man take her with him. It was a little wrong, but to tell the truth, such a loud tone of voice was even pleasant for the Duke to hear. Of course, the girl didn't just ask to join the man's company. According to the announcement that the book showed, Lexi will try to save Gregory and the evil dragon will kill him. The guide had previously pointed out that Lexi Spare's very existence was variable, so he would often be in mortal danger. Only because the young lady had learned of this, she had clearly decided for herself that she would protect him to the very end, even if she received a fine. That day, the girl assumed that the guy was probably going to meet the main commander of the Knights, Gregory, so she asked to take her with him. Of course, the guy agreed without any problems, and already in the afternoon they were preparing for the trip. Only this time the young lady was slightly mistaken. It turned out that the matter the man was talking about was just buying clothes. Tracy thought that the knight was going to meet the warrior to pay for her rescue, but everything turned out to be much simpler. Lexi himself admitted that he took the risk of taking advantage of the opportunity to buy clothes while they were in the capital. The young man was even glad that the girl herself suggested that they go together. The lovely lady simply could not refuse the gentleman to try on the outfit that he had personally chosen for her. Besides, the guy had specially chosen a dress with a hood because it was cold in the north. Such attentiveness was very sweet of him. In his past life, he took care of Sandra, but now he pays attention to the new main character of the story. As soon as the lady showed up to the man in her new outfit, the guy simply showered her with compliments. And the image really looked wonderful. After trying it on, the man asked to send the dress to the castle, and now they could go on business together. It seemed that the sir was going to go to a gun shop. In turn, his companion immediately changed into the new clothes they had bought. The prince returned from the shop with a new dagger. This is the very sword that Tracy was thinking about. This weapon was often used by him in his past life. And it looks quite good in Spare's hands, complementing the brave image of a courageous gentleman. But imagine the lady's surprise when it turned out that the guy actually bought this sword for Tracy. Of course, it would be better if this thing never comes in handy in the girl's life. But still, it is worth being on guard, and you can use this thing in a moment of danger. After going shopping, the boys were already thinking about going back. But on the way back, they accidentally met Gregory. It turned out that the knight lived nearby. The meeting was unplanned, but the senior commander of the warriors had already wanted to talk to his little brother. In truth, the young man had been tasked with entertaining the delegation of the Kingdom of Court. In turn, Kronos had dumped all the tasks on Gregory. According to the guy, Prince Court is very interested in fencing, and he would like to meet Mr. Spare personally since he will be among the diplomats. That is why Gregory hoped that his friend would be able to cross paths with this athlete while he was in the capital. Although Lexi initially thought that the imperial family wanted him to leave as soon as possible, the guard reported that there was no need to worry about this. The prince sent the letter when he learned that the imperial count was currently in the capital. The Emperor has no choice now to resist. That is why the return to the North can be postponed. But watching the guys from the side and carefully eavesdropping on their conversation, Lady Tracy understood that on that day of meeting with court, the man could be exposed to enormous danger, even die out of nowhere. That is why the traveler should go with him at any cost. How fortunate the conversation was that Gregory himself invited the lady to come along that day. July 12th, 4:08 Adam. The delegation from the Kingdom of Court arrived in the capital of the Empire of Adam 3 days ago. Finally, the day had come. The trailer didn't initially show how exactly Lexi would die, so the main character simply couldn't relax. But the lady had already asked the question earlier about what would happen if she herself died. That night, the system notified that the death of the main character meant the end of the whole story. Well, the girl had nothing to worry about. Her safety was guaranteed until they reached the intended ending. It seemed as if the girl who had been reborn as the heroine from the book had an invisible invincibility boost. But the young lady simply hated being wounded, and so she promised herself to be extremely careful. However, the lady's worries were easy to notice from the outside. That day, even her companion noticed how nervous Tracy looked. She had to lie that she was afraid of the many people in this place, because the princess had never seen a foreign delegation before. The time had come for the meeting. The first thing to do was to greet the beautiful Princess Sandra. The Empress greeted Sir Lexi warmly. But the first question that arose was, what was this girl doing here? It turned out that she had originally been assigned to entertain the delegation, so she wanted to help. The princess was a little disappointed, because Lexi openly showed his displeasure in front of her. But even so, she admired the man so much that she simply could not help but forgive him his minor sins instantly. At such moments, the young lady looked as if she was extremely interested in him. Even Tracy could easily see it from the side. The debut was without any special incidents. Now, the crown princess was very curious about what Lexi really thought of her. This girl is very cute, will be able to quickly fall in love with her. But will it happen in this story with a new plot? Also, will Sandra be able to capture the Duke's heart when literally at the same moment another girl is standing in front of her, holding the hand of the man of her dreams? The first thing the girl did was to notice out loud what a close relationship the young guys had. Although the princess had already been told that Tracy was a distant relative of the prince. The beauty admitted that if Sir Leshy were her younger brother, she would also like to be friends with him. Moreover, in order to make friends with her new acquaintance, the lady decided to invite the girl to spend their free time together. The talk was about the upcoming tea party for members of the court royal family. To lure her friend to a social event, Sandra told her that Gregory's brother would also be there. In addition, the young lady also suggested that Lexi join. However, the boy immediately seemed completely uninterested in this entertainment. He justified himself by saying that he did not want to attend the tea party, since there would be nothing funny there. In fact, his reluctance may be for the best. The lady was worried about the safety of other people. If Gregory participated, an evil dragon might appear. One way or another, the guys decided to go to the tea ceremony. While Tracy was sitting at the table and Lexi was spending time with another aristocrat, the knight noticed how the girl was greedily looking at Mr. Spur. It was easy to guess from the Mrs. behavior that she liked the man, which Gregory decided to directly notice that day. Just a habit, the princess answered without hesitation, although she didn't need any excuses to show her feelings. Overhearing the meager conversation of the young individuals, the owner of the mansion, Princess Sandra, noticed how bored her guests were. Miss became slightly embarrassed, since she did not properly organize the event, so the lady decided to apologize. Immediately after, Tracy tried to console the young lady and denied the awkwardness of the stop, in addition not forgetting to praise the treats. But the gentleman sitting next to her did not let the young lady avoid embarrassment so easily. "Liar, you continued to eat and drink precisely because you were bored," the young man said mockingly. At the same time, Princess Sandra only asked the guy not to create unnecessary problems. If he knew that the girl was bored, he could have entertained her. But instead, he was having fun himself, making fun of others. The girl also added that her uncle would be very upset if he saw such behavior of the young man. But the reminders about his uncle were unnecessary now. This was a very sensitive topic for Gregory, since his father had died after being accused of treason. The guy's mood instantly worsened so much that he simply did not continue drinking tea with the ladies, got up from under the table, and decided to take a little walk alone. Tracy also decided not to stay long, so she was already thinking about leaving. But before the young lady got up, Sandra asked her for a favor. It turned out that her brother hated being alone, no matter what he said. And since the princess herself could not walk, she decided to ask Tracy to go after him. Besides, Lexi now seemed busy talking to other women, so the main character of this story hoped that everything would be fine now if she and Mr. Spare separated. A few minutes later, Tracy was already next to the main commander of the Knights, although the guy himself did not want to talk to anyone right now. But as soon as he saw his old acquaintance, he would even be glad to meet her. Initially, he thought that Sandra would follow him. It so happened that the girl caught him at an awkward moment when the young man let his emotions out and shed a tear. But the knight himself, of course, was not going to confess his feelings, so he simply lied, as if he yawned and only then shed a little tear. At that very moment, the traveler noticed a 4-leaf clover, a symbol of true luck. The guy immediately began to persistently ask her to give him this plant, since the girl came here to console him. Then he accidentally let it slip that he really cried, without noticing it. The situation instantly became so funny that the lady even laughed. However, the girl was still not going to give away his hands. This would be her special gift for the prince. At the same time, in order not to offend her friend, the lady decided to look for another clover for Lexi, and she still gave the first symbol of luck to the knight. Looking at all this from the outside, Gregory was really surprised how much the girl loved the man. The thing is, Gregory was absolutely sure that the guy didn't deserve such treatment. The imperial family had already chosen Sandra as his bride, so the illegitimate son Adam was worried that Tracy would only hurt herself more when nothing worked out with her lover. But the beautiful girl herself understood this, and that day she only asked the mister to pretend that he knew nothing. Well, it just so happened that Gregory will always be on his sister's side. This time, the man gave the clover to his interlocutor as a sign of passing on his luck to her. Afterwards, the young people had to go back. When the boys approached the tea table, the traveler witnessed a completely unexpected scene. Sandra was drinking wine with her friend. Initially, in the original story of the book, there were no such gatherings, which is why the heroine was so surprised. Brother immediately decided to approach Sandra because he knows that the girl is weak as soon as she gets drunk. Then Gregory decided to ask what Lexi was doing at that time and why she didn't stop the princess. Sandra then replied that she thought the man had gone looking for Lady Tracy. Luckily, Lexi's image appeared in front of the boys literally a few seconds later. Right away, the partner pointed out to the man that it was his fault that the princess got a little drunk. Now the brother told the young man to take responsibility and watch the weak duchess while Gregory dealt with another drunk princess. The situation was indeed tense, so the man asked his companion's permission to stay in the palace for a while. The girls really needed help to recover from the strong drink. Of course, Tracy agreed to sit in the castle for a while. When Lexi asked the guards of the house to look after Sandra, at that moment the girls seemed to misunderstand the whole situation and immediately began to beg the man not to leave her. Then the main character of this story accidentally saw a picture that was not entirely pleasant for her. The young princess was so close to her guest that their bodies were literally touching each other. Mrs. Is could only console herself that everything was fine, since she should have gotten used to it long ago. In fact, Princess Sandra was only pretending to be drunk that day. How happy the girl was when her idol walked her home, since she initially assumed that the guy would refuse to do so. Although the man said that the companion, who also came to the tea party, was his relative, Sandra initially noticed the young lady's gaze, which is definitely not used to look at family members. However, the aristocrat still calmed her jealousy by saying that Lexi behaves like this with absolutely every girl. He is simply showing his politeness and good manners. When the man brought the mistress of the palace straight to her sleeping quarters, he nevertheless decided to admit that he did not hope that from this moment on the miss would no longer ask for such personal services. This simply could not help but upset the girl. Moreover, in response, the young lady noted that the guy always helped her when she asked him in childhood. Although the man immediately explained that he was just little, and now, already in adulthood and conscious age, he simply does not want to start a pointless argument with the princess. The reason for that is quite simple. Lexi, as a real man, simply did not want to eliminate the scenes of jealousy with another girl, only because he knew that it could bother his lady of the heart. That is why he confessed that day that he did not want the lady to behave like that. Besides, Lexi came to this room only to say it. As soon as the guests left the castle's sleeping quarters, the princess felt simply awful. Inside her, she felt as if the girl had just been abandoned without even being allowed to confess. At the same time, the main character of this story was already in her room, carefully considering the details of the plot. Having replayed the outcome of the day in her head several times, the lady silently opened the book and flipped through several pages. Now she found photographs of that very get-together in a secluded place with Gregory. The young lady was indeed surprised why the scene with the knight was recorded in the system. But at that moment, the manual only asked her a question. Was it possible not to record such a cute scene with the main character? The girl's inside seemed to turn over from what she heard. Now she knows for sure. Gregory has become the main character, no matter how absurd it may sound. Well, the main character always needs her own main character. And it was decided to make Gregory Adam Wexler the main character. The traveler could not agree with this at all, since for her, the only main character was Lexi. But the role of Spare's heir was currently uncertain. That was why Gregory took his place. The lady didn't get to talk to the book for long that day, because the man the girl was in love with decided to visit her bedroom. He noticed the light in the lady's room, although it was already late, so he decided to go in to keep an eye on the young lady. In addition, the man admitted that he was genuinely curious about whether the girl wanted to do something before returning to the north. For example, the guy suggested visiting the night market. At the same moment, the messenger announced a new, unexpected mission above the reincarnated girl's head. Go to the night market with Lexi and accept the invitation for a date, which meant that this was a plot scene. In Mrs. Room, the young man also noticed that same book. Since the lady simply couldn't reveal all her cards, she decided to explain to the guy that it was an ordinary book that she was going to read before going to bed. The girl thought that from the outside, this book looked like the Bible, so she decided to lie and say that inside there were ordinary prayers. To be honest, the guy liked the lady's faith and erudition, and he even offered to buy her a couple of new books, if only she wanted. The man then again suggested that Tracy go to the night market the next day. In addition, there would be fireworks for the kingdom's delegation, and the guy was simply sure that his chosen one would like him. But at that moment, the main character of this story was not thinking about beautiful fireworks, but about the development of the plot. Now, something completely unexpected and very unusual is happening. There was no such scene before. Anyway, the lady has already agreed to a date, and the system notified that the main scene will begin soon. Later, the guide shared important details. During the fireworks, an evil dragon will appear, so you should be prepared and not deviate from the course. The day X came. The young people were walking around the city at night, looking at all sorts of small trinkets. But at that moment, the girl couldn't even completely relax, because she didn't know when the dragon would appear and was very nervous. After a couple of hours of walking around the market, the gentleman suggested that they take a rest in a cafe with desserts, because he assumed that his girlfriend's legs were already tired from walking. Since the guy didn't like sweets at all, this offer sounded especially sweet from him, since, first of all, he didn't forget that his companion liked him. They took each other by the hand and went together towards the cafe. Imagine the surprise of the young people when they accidentally met Gregory and his little sister at one of the tables of the establishment. But this meeting was completely disadvantageous for the plot, and Tracy understood it perfectly well. At that moment, the mister seemed to read the emotions on the beauty's face, so he even suggested going to another place. But it so happened that Lexi's glances had already crossed with their mutual friend, so pretending that they hadn't noticed each other was simply ugly. They still had to greet each other all at once. According to the rules of etiquette, the first thing Tracy and Lexi did was bow a little before the princess of the Atom Empire. In response, the girl only decided to apologize for yesterday, although other acquaintances did not know what had happened between her and Lexi alone that evening. Right after, the brother pointed out that Sandra looked sad this morning, after which he decided to check with his friend if he knew the reason for this. But in order not to start a showdown with the ladies, the guys decided to step aside a bit and talk in private. The man had only asked a leading question, hinting that he shouldn't be asked about the princess's feelings, and Lexi found this behavior strange. At the very least, the knight thought that the young man understood how he had offended someone else's sister and simply didn't want to admit his guilt. Soon, the ladies returned to the men, wondering what the guys were talking about without them. However, it was inappropriate to sort things out now, so the commander lied, saying that he was simply offering the gentlemen to watch the fireworks together. As soon as the knight finished speaking, a new notification window popped up over the girl's head. This time, it was a reminder that she needed to accept Gregory's offer for the story to progress. The girl was also warned that the dialogues would continue automatically. From the outside, it all seemed crazy. If Tracy went to watch the fireworks with Gregory, something bad would obviously happen to Lexi. So Tracy had to decide in a second what was the best way to handle this situation. But the girl didn't think quite right. She just covered her mouth with her hands, not allowing the automatic dialogues to develop. It seems that this was a mistake. In a second, the book reported that the traveler refused to complete the task, because of which a penalty would be assigned. The accelerated appearance of an evil dragon. At that moment, all the lights around the capital went out. People screamed in fear. It seemed that the evil dragon would appear right now. And indeed, in an instant, the screams became much louder. Run! It's an evil dragon. How did it end up near the capital? Run away! At that moment, they could be heard from every corner of the street. Because of the darkness, the situation became even more tense. Now Tracy couldn't find Lexi. The lady was visibly worried, and to calm her down, Gregory decided to offer to act together. The first thing the man asked was to evacuate, but the lady absolutely could not leave the Emperor in an unsafe position, so she immediately reported to the knight that the Duke was missing. But Gregory responded to this absolutely calmly, pointing out that the guy probably went to where the dragon would appear. In turn, the knight believed that they needed to stay here, because it was worth being under a protective barrier. But the traveler, who was already living this story more than once, understood perfectly well that Lexi simply would not be able to withstand all this load. The barrier would break at any moment. However, even so, the young man standing next to her had no intention of letting the fragile girl go. Tracy really did look like she was crazy when she was about to walk towards danger. And although the girl demanded that Gregory let go of her hand, the man had no intention of doing so. He had already started shouting at the young lady to evacuate if she did not want to die. In addition, the guy simply did not understand the reason why Miss should go there, because the girl could only get hurt. In order to explain the full danger of the situation, the young lady decided to point out that the evil dragon was too strong even for the best swordmasters, and explained that the Duke was also in danger. And yet, the knight's chief commander was not going to let one ordinary girl go so easily. The situation was critical, so the mister decided to go with the lady. And in general, Gregory simply would not be able to look Lexi in the face if he let Tracy go alone. First of all, the girl decided to inform the guy that she had a weak body, so she would not be able to help the knight. And if the sir got hurt, he would have to wait for the doctor. Although Gregory did not even worry about this, since there were many healers in the palace. But at that moment, the young man remembered another problem. Gregory had left his sister in the building, and all that was left was to hope that the aristocrat had figured out how to evacuate herself. Everything continued to go wrong. Literally, a few seconds later, the young people saw Gregory's sister running, and right behind her, the blocking sphere was destroyed by the dragon's mighty force. Now Princess Sandra was looking into the eyes of real evil. While Gregory went to save his sister, Lexi found Tracy. He asked the girl to stay away and also joined in the massacre of the dragon. The boys were really good with the sword, but it wasn't that easy to fight such a powerful beast. Besides, Gregory was really angry that his little sister had come here at all, when she should have been saved along with the other civilians. In any case, it was good that she was okay now. While the boys were hiding around the corner, gathering strength before their second attempt at fighting the beast, Gregory asked the Count to be responsible for Sandra's safety. In turn, the girl had to stay where she was, because literally a few meters away from her, it was too dangerous. The biggest threat to humans was the dragon's fiery breath. Now it was time to quickly figure out how to block the animal's breathing. But the dragon was not stupid, so he actively used his advantageous position. In a moment, he opened his mouth wide in order to pour all the fire in Tracy's direction. But the dexterous knight Gregory appeared in front of the lady literally out of nowhere, and with his body completely blocked the Mrs. body. Luckily, Mrs. Is was fine. The prince was also feeling fine. But the whole situation still scared the boys. The system had previously reported that the main characters were not dying, but no one had said that they could not be harmed. Since the girl was still in a dangerous situation, Gregory offered to let her into the building. But before he could finish speaking, Lexi greedily pushed the guy away from the princess. The guys continued to argue, but there really was no time for that now. First of all, their main goal now was to survive by killing the dragon. Luckily, Lexi said that the dragon had flown away because high-ranking knights had come. But was that true? Tracy doubted the truthfulness of the prince's words. She believed that this simply could not happen according to the plot of the book. But in turn, Count Lexi could very well lie because of his jealousy. At that moment, the man pulled his companion by the hand and led her in an unclear direction. However, the girl decided to stop and ask where he was going to go next. At that moment, the main character of this story also noticed a strange, painful expression on her partner's face. That's when the security sphere behind the man cracked again. The dragon was back. The story continues. The male protagonist is in danger. If Lexi doesn't go save Gregory, the knight might just die. And the beautiful girl understood that. But Lexi initially stated outright that he would not go to Gregory, so he also urged the beauty not to go there. The systems conductor also reported that Lexi had been blown off course and that Gregory Wexler was mortally wounded. Gregory was indeed in danger now, and Madame Tracy simply could not leave it at that. The guide continued to write that in order for the story to continue, Tracy must use her hidden power. The book suggested saving Gregory by using the ability of the Astras, which drains the enemy's life force. However, if Tracy agrees to save the knight, Lexi's death will be rendered impossible. The death will be annulled, so the girl simply has no reason not to agree. It's time to act. In a second, Miss pulled her hand out of Lexi's embrace to show that she still wanted to leave the guy. The lady promised to come back to him and asked him not to worry about her anymore. At this time, Gregory was actively fighting the dragon. The young man was lucky that he was only slightly hurt, but he was not sure if he would be lucky the second time. A few seconds later, the guy noticed the image of a girl he knew. But this time, he was not happy to see Tracy, because now the lady was in great danger. Before he could even ask the girl to come back, Gregory witnessed an incredible sight. The sweet princess took a special mirror, uttered the spell Aster, and immediately after everything around was blinded by a sky blue light. The beast did not torture itself, and simply flew away from there. Aster really did have an effect on the dragon. In addition to the predator flying away, Lexi also escaped his planned death. As soon as the girl dealt with the animal, the Emperor's son Spare immediately approached her. The man's surprise could not be expressed in words. He did not even imagine that the girl had such power. Kronos and Sandra were also perplexed. The main heir to the throne quickly found his sister as soon as he felt the danger to her life. They also decided to approach the saint and ask what it was all about. After a short wait, Tracy pulled back the covers the man had placed over her to reveal her true wise nature, which she had hidden for so long. The princess's true identity meant that Lexi had sent a false report to the imperial family, while the master continued to argue with the knight about the wise nation not being citizens of their empire. The man insisted that hiding one's status for one's own protection was not a violation for ethnic minorities, and he also pointed out that His Highness knew better what those words meant. However, the fact remains that His Highness had threatened Is. It seemed that day that Sandra first learned that Kronos had behaved so badly towards a lady. But her brother seemed to take it calmly, and only added that the boys had nothing to worry about, because it was just an accident. Yes, in the kingdom they keep people in dungeons and torture them by accident, Tracy added. Sandra's expression instantly changed dramatically. The girl really had not been informed about such cruelty of her relative. At the same time, the brother continued to pretend that it was not true, that the interlocutor was acting completely ignorant towards them. But Lady Sandra no longer wanted to listen to any excuses from the young man. In his defense, Kronos mentioned that there is also a clause that states that the imperial family will make it a priority to protect minorities that are in danger of extinction. Given Issa's healing powers, there are plenty of threats to her life. Therefore, the knight suggested entrusting her safety to the imperial family, since he believed that they would be the best ones to protect the miss. Only the elder Adam mentioned that he had already entrusted this to a member of the imperial family. Kronos became even more angry. Even his own sister could not calm the guy's indignation. In turn, the main character of this story at that moment only seriously thought about the fact that she was alive only thanks to Gregory. Fortunately, judging by their reaction, it was the first time they saw this power. Because if they found out that Tracy could use the Astra spell, they would try to control her by any means. Even the girl herself understood this perfectly well. In order to calm the dispute down, Kronos promised to sort it out officially later, and his sister even decided to thank Lexi. At this point, the unpleasant meeting with the heirs to the throne was over. Right after Mr. Spear decided to apologize to Gregory for everything that had happened earlier, the man admitted that he had been a little overexcited. Now Lexi should go back to the north, and then sort everything out here. This option will really be the best in this situation. They met again for once, although now it is time to part again. But this is clearly not the last meeting of the young guys. The guys will see each other again. A little later, Lexi decided to find out all the details from the book. That evening, the man learned that the main male character had been changed from Lexi Spur to Gregory Adam Wexler. There is a penalty for deviating from the plot, and excessive punishment can lead to irreversible consequences. The man also asked to be told more about Iz, to tell him everything, without exception. He also ordered the book to inform him immediately if the content changed. However, the textbook warned that unsynchronized information was updated slowly. The guide meant that it was not enough for the guy to simply touch the girl with the book. It turns out that contact between the two textbooks is necessary, in which case synchronization is possible based on the traveler's memories. Since Lexi didn't know the return conditions, contact between the books was needed to obtain the information. At that moment, the guy thought about the fact that he was now talking to Tracy's book. Then it turns out that the girl had already been given a new part. Now the man decided that he had to send Tracy back. There was no other way. But the system confirmed that if the man did the synchronization, the lady would also know about it. Although until the traveler himself asked about it, the guide would not talk about it. That is why the young man decided that day that he needed to do the synchronization unnoticed. At the same time, Crown Princess Wise was also exploring the plot twists. Tracy thinks that Gregory needs to be saved, so she risks her life and uses a secret power. It was already stated in the book. A heroine who acts subconsciously, not yet knowing about her love. It was amazing. In order to protect the prince, the heroine meets him face to face and fights with him, as the book described. But the reality was too distorted and in the opinion of the girl herself. But in essence, in the novel, they show only those parts that they want to show. This is a kind of beauty of omission. In any case, for a book to continue, it must be interesting. At that moment, the girl seriously thought that if the content of the book differed from her real feelings, then it could be that the plot she saw in her past life was also not real. In her past life, the girl definitely thought the book's contents were true. But now there's a chance that there are lines and monologues written there that Tracy herself never said. Then the young lady moved on to reading the part about the wound Gregory received after the scene with the dragon. It turns out that when the knight returned home, the king noticed the young man's injury. But the older man had no intention of pitying the boy, as he considered the injury so minor that it should not cause him pain. The old man even pointed out that this was too light a punishment compared to what Gregory himself had done. The man ordered him not to act recklessly anymore if the boy did not want to be like his father. The uncle was so angry that he did not know how much more patience he could have. Afterwards, His Majesty asked the servants to ensure that Gregory Adam Wexler did not leave his chambers for the next month. The emperor had indeed become very lenient. The rapidly passing years of aging were indeed difficult to hide. In any case, Gregory was given time to rest well first. As soon as the girl carefully read the details of the knight's life, her mood changed. However, at that moment, the lady realized that if this was how things had happened, even if she returned to the north, her connection with the imperial family would not be broken. At the same time, Sandra was not doing so well. The first princess was feeling simply awful. Even a walk in her favorite flower garden of the palace did not help to lift Madame's mood. Sandra is a universally recognized noble princess, the most praised and beautiful in the entire empire, and the most suitable man for her could be Count Lexi Spare. To be honest, the girl thought that he thought so too, but now the lady simply did not understand why he chose her. The princess felt as if her favorite bird had escaped from its cage. As if Lexi was definitely hers, but only until a special moment. The aristocrat saw how well they suited each other, but that girl changed everything. Who would have known that some pathetic Iz would push her aside? While the lady was thinking about all the unfairness of this life, she was putting together a flower arrangement. Her assistant expressed an opinion about the bouquet. One of the flowers did not fit here because it was a different color. The mistress agreed with her servant. To be beautiful, the flowers should be the same color. After that, the lady asked the maid to put this vase in the bedroom. As soon as the maid left, Sandra brazenly tore one of the roses to shreds. In this way, she decided to splash out all her negativity because of the worthless girl of the Iz family. The princess didn't want some simpleton to interfere with her. Now the crown princess's goal was to show the girl what happens to everyone who has their eye on Sandra's things. That same evening, Lady Tracy was happy that they would finally be leaving the capital tomorrow. The girl silently watched from the side as her maid Margaret prepared for the departure. Thanks to Gregory preparing a power of attorney with the imperial seal, the imperial family made Tracy's interests their priority and released her. But now the traveler was still not sure whether she would be able to return home as soon as possible. That day, Mr. Lexi decided to visit Miss Iz in her chambers. The guy was curious about what his friend was doing now, so he dropped by her room on the way back. The man was simply checking how the preparations for the departure to the north were going. Then the young man reminded her that this was Tracy's first trip to this area. It was obvious that the girl was really looking forward to the moment when they would visit his native surroundings. Initially, Lexi was worried about the lady. But now, when the guy saw the joy and shining eyes of the girl, he was convinced that everything was fine. The only thing that confused the man was the fireworks. In the end, he was never able to see them. But the noblewoman asked the imperial heir not to be upset, since next time he would definitely be able to see them. And yet, the guy who looked a little like a little boy was quite offended. He honestly admitted that he really wanted to see this spectacle. As soon as the hero told this to the beauty, she couldn't even hold back her laughter. Such a courageous man seemed so cute to her for the first time. And yet, so that the mister wouldn't get too upset, the girl promised him that next time they would definitely go watch the fireworks together. As the main character of the story was about to go to bed, the book showed a preview of the plot. By coincidence, the dragon's resentment grew, and this affected the forces of evil. Due to the increased number of monsters, Tracy and her group, heading north, found themselves in a difficult situation. While Lexi goes to fight monsters, an unexpected incident will happen to Tracy. Due to the fact that the traveler can interfere with the plot of the story, the guide could not say anything more. He did not even answer the girl's question about what an unexpected incident means. And although this was already too much, Tracy was no stranger to this. The book had done this before. But what worried the heroine even more was what Spare was thinking about. A little later, before his departure, Lexi decided to give the girl a new ring, because her jewelry broke when she fought the dragon. And on the way north, something could happen. So the gentleman thought it would be better if the lady hid her hair color. Then the man decided to start a conversation about the power that the lady used on the dragon. Without waiting for all the questions from the interlocutor, Tracy was the first to tell that this was a hidden ability of the Wise clan, a skill that takes away the life force of the enemy, provided secretly. In any case, the Count thought it would be better if the lady kept it a secret, since he did not know how the imperial family would react to it. After all, it's the princess's job to figure out what's going on with Lexi. As much as the heroine, deep down, really wants the guy to do this consciously, to pay attention to her, not just because she became the main character, and not because she took Sandra's place. The next day, when the boys were riding in the carriage, there were difficulties with movement. Apparently, the roads were under control again. Therefore, Lexi said that the boys would have to make a stop here. Despite all this, the guy assured the girl that there was nothing to worry about, and suggested that it would be better to unload the things and go to some cafe nearby. In the end, everything happened exactly as the book said earlier. The dragon is a creature that heals wounds by concentrating its anger. And to heal the wound inflicted on Tracy, it gathered the forces of evil. Noticing the girl's worries, the guy asked her not to worry about the road. Lexi even promised that if it was impossible to go like this, they would find another way. The young man did not know that at that moment the girl was not thinking about the difficulties of moving north. Besides, without showing it, the girl understood that if everything continued like this, Lexi would still assemble a punitive detachment. While the boys were sitting at the table, a little boy came up to them. He was selling handmade bracelets. "Please buy a bracelet for your wife. It matches the color of her eyes very well," asked the insightful boy. "Darling, let's buy it if you like it," the prince said right after. This address really shocked the main character of this story. What other darling? Was he serious? While the girl couldn't get over the way her interlocutor called her, the guy emphasized the beauty of the handicraft. In order to finally stop being embarrassed, the girl decided to ask the boy to show her everything he had, so she could choose the right decoration for herself. The boy brought several bracelets, some of them had shells added, some were made of real rope. In the end, the girl chose the most beautiful bracelet for herself, and the man paid for it with a hefty coin. The young man was so happy with such payment that he was ready to bless the older gentleman. And then Tracy decided to also choose the most suitable bracelet for her companion. After the man carefully fastened the jewelry on himself, he handed the lady the bracelet he had previously chosen for her with a warm smile. With a slight bow of his head, he invited her to accept this token of attention and let him catch the bracelet on her graceful wrist. It may all seem like a small thing, but because of a little boy, this day will definitely be remembered by young people for a long time. Not much time had passed since their stop in the kingdom of Hak. An order was issued that all roads were to be closed. As a result, the exit from the village and even from nearby places was closed. Therefore, Lexi requested a personal meeting with Lord Hak. The prince also submitted requests for help to the imperial family, but only because there was no response. He learned that the capital was also aware of the danger of the situation caused by the threat of monster attacks. The very next day, Lexi personally formed a punitive detachment. Tracy was the first to start the conversation, saying that she heard the guy was going on a punitive expedition. The man merely remarked in response that he thought the lady would have to stay there for the time being. Moreover, since that was the case, the gentleman thought his companion would need protection. At that very moment, a friendly gentleman entered the hall. His name was Eddie Maximus. From now on, he would be responsible for the safety of the lady. For the guy, it was, first of all, an honor to help the crown princess of the Iz family. Based on everything that had happened, the girl was truly surprised why Lexi had given her such a good warrior. It would have been better if the count had taken him into his squad. Then the man seemed to read her thoughts and therefore told the girl not to worry too much. The main character of this story really could only hope that everything would be fine. Well, at least in the book, nothing like that was said, which meant a safe fork in the plot. As soon as Lexi said goodbye to the girl and left the room, Maximus continued to assure that it was truly a great honor for him to accompany the lady. Most likely, the guys in the squad even began to envy him, because many young men are sincerely interested in the lady. And such a frantic interest is not even because of rumors about the girl. It's all because they are simply interested in who the young lady is for His Excellency. From the day the master brought the girl out of the rubble of corpses, they, the Black Knights, decided to swear allegiance to the lady. The silhouette of a lady who entered the room then silenced Lord Eddie's unnecessary chatter. It was Margarita who had come to see her mistress. Tracy was glad to see the boys together again. But even with all this, the meeting seemed to evoke strange feelings in the heroine. At that moment, the Countess felt déjà vu, as if she had once again looked into her past life. Then Margarita suggested that Madame go for a walk. It was boring to sit in one room anyway, and since the guys had arrived in another kingdom, they could all go for a walk together. Besides, the personal assistant heard that there is a large zoo in Hakka. They say that only in the court area can you see an animal called a camel. The maid said that it was a horse with several humps on its back. But the girl was not well read, so she did not know that a camel is not a horse. The knight did make a small remark to the girl about this, but she only jokingly nudged his elbow so that he would not act up. In that moment, Tracy noticed what a wonderful friendly relationship Eddie had with Margarita. Now the girl was convinced that she knew why Maximus was so sad when Margarita died in her past life. And yet, without touching on the sad topic, now the boys could all go to the zoo together in a carriage. The girl hoped that this time everything would work out for the young guys in the personal aspect. The impressions of the zoo were truly amazing, in contrast to the annoying smell of animals. Soon the boys were already hungry, so it was time for lunch. Then Eddie offered to take the ladies to a place he had learned about earlier. At that moment, the heroine noticed a boy she already knew who was sitting away from everyone. It was the same young man who sold jewelry in the cafe. Meanwhile, during the punitive expedition, the captain of the knights, the landowner of the area, suggested splitting up so that things would go faster. The gang leader admitted that he wanted His Excellency to take over the southeast side. That's what they did. If there were any problems in the search, they would contact each other immediately. Now it was time for both the accompanying detachment and Lexi's warriors to set off, moving as quickly as possible. Let's return to the city district of Hak. Seeing the boy, the kind lady decided to greet him and ask why the gentleman was crying. Margarita and Eddie noticed where the lady was heading, and so they also approached the princess to ask who this boy was. The first thing the adults asked was the child's name. According to the boy himself, his name was John. It turned out that the baby was crying because everything had been taken away from him. John's mother had an accident with a carriage, and he was going to pay for her treatment with jewelry. But some con took everything from him, including gold. According to the preschooler, this happened because of his gambling debt to the boy. After listening to the guy carefully, the first thing Eddie Maximus said was his opinion that it was better not to get involved in this. Initially, Tracy came up just to say hello, but at some point, everything became so awkward. But now the lady was really worried about the guy, at least about money for food. Will everything be okay with him? A moment later, a sudden mission appeared above the princess's face. The notice stated that John's mother was on the verge of life and death, and that the boy's family should be saved. If Tracy refused, the boy's mother would die, and Khan would beat the boy to death. It sounded scary. Most likely, this is the unexpected incident that was mentioned in the preview. If it is not related to Lexi's death, then the punishment is dangerous. Tracy did not know what could happen to him during the hike, so here the penalty should be reduced as much as possible. Although the accompanying knight still believed that the lady should not help the child, and if His Excellency found out, there could be unpleasant consequences. However, in response, the young lady only noted that nothing would happen if he did not find out. The heiress of Iz suggested simply looking into someone else's house for a while and then returning immediately. She gave the boy her hand and invited him to come with them. That was how Operation Bitter Child's Doom officially began. Then the kid led the adults to a rather simple house. Tracy, of course, expected something like that, but this house was too dilapidated. John's mother looked really bad, and the woman was very ashamed that her son had brought such a dear guest to their home. At that moment, the sick woman involuntarily began to cough up blood. It was time to immediately use the end spell and heal the child's mother. In addition, the book said that in case of refusal, the mother would die immediately. Doctors simply would not have time to come to such a village. It was necessary to act so quickly that Tracy heard a countdown from the system. What to do now? The girl did not know until the end, because this would be another time of power surge, in addition to saving Lexi. If the madam gets a fine, it could be dangerous. But she could not just watch the mother of a defenseless child die, so when the report was already coming to an end, the lady took off her ring and said the main word of the spell. It seems that Margarita and Eddie were not thrilled that their mistress used force, because the guys thought that they could have simply called the healers. The most important thing is that the girl still healed the child's mother, and now everything was fine with them. However, before leaving, Maximus explained to the woman that she had been given a huge favor today, and it was important to understand that she could not tell anyone about it. At the very least, the result of the girl involuntarily changing her hair color showed that magic had been used here. John's mother promised to remain silent as her gratitude. Immediately after the healing, the guests went back home. Fortunately, Tracy had already recovered from using the asters, so she was not so tired now. But now the girl no longer knew whether everything would work out in John's family. All that was left was to hope that nothing would happen to him. At the same time, the Lord of the Senior Knights, Hawk, fell from powerlessness. Immediately after, his warriors came to help the man up. The commander explained that he was fine and had simply tripped on level ground. The man asked the soldiers not to worry about him and ordered them to move on. But something was definitely wrong. Until the morning, Captain Lexi also fought with the enemies. Fortunately, there were fewer dark forces than they expected. Therefore, it was to be hoped that everything would end quickly. Only His Excellency knew that evil dragons loved the nighttime, so it was worth conveying to all the other knights that no one should relax until then. At the same time, the chief assistant pointed out that they still had a reserve of the cleansing stone used to humidify and cleanse the air. Chris also added that cleaning the dragon's mind was the task of the imperial family. It was obvious that the boy did not like the fact that he was sent to the north. It felt like he was being kicked out, but Chris's friend asked him not to worry. Although it is easy to understand the fighter, he was simply offended. Why did the commander leave everything like that? This decision did not look like the behavior of a courageous hero. It was then that the warrior learned from his commander that in return the chief had received something more valuable than any praise from the higher powers. So Mr. Spur asked the boy not to be surprised if the imperial family took credit for this too. That day, Chris noticed how pessimistic His Excellency was about the imperial family. And the guy also seriously wondered what this something more was that Lexi had received. Since the work was finished for today, the guys decided to take a little rest and return to their meeting place with the princess. It turned out that the girl was just waiting for the man, so they sat down together for dinner. The first thing the lady did was share her impressions about how many amazing animals there were in this area. The lady said that camels didn't have a very good smell from their mouths, but just looking at them was quite interesting. Listening attentively to interesting stories from the zoo, the guy even felt sorry for a moment that they never managed to go together. As soon as the man pointed this out, the girl thought that she was behaving in an inappropriate manner. The gentleman had been having a hard time on the hike all this time, and she was sitting here bragging about how much fun she had had. It really didn't look very nice on her part, but the man didn't want the girl to feel guilty about having fun alone. Since they had come here, the guy thought it would be nice to see everything here. In general, he spoke only with the goal of letting his interlocutor know how much he wanted to have fun with her. As soon as the girl was finally convinced of his intentions, she decided to offer to go somewhere together next time. Of course, the man simply could not refuse her. Besides, the knight captain thought that the punitive expedition should soon come to an end. The most important thing is that they installed the cleansing stone, and it is almost all gone. Once the remaining evil force is dealt with, the passage will be opened again. There is so much energy in this area, it seems that the dragon's influence on these lands is not so strong. So everything was going well. They wouldn't have to wait that long. Soon the young people would be able to go north. By the way, the guy suggested his companion to go for a walk together. As soon as the hike is over, the guys will be able to go anywhere the lady wants. The man then decided to ask the girl if everything was okay with her guard Eddie, wondering if the knight had caused any inconvenience. Even though the man was asking all this just like that, it still made the girl wary, as if Lexi had finally found out about what happened today. Tracy decided to tell that Maximus was really very pleasant and sweet in communication, which made people feel comfortable around him. So the lady was sure that the guy should not worry about anything. Then the gentleman noticed that he and the girl had become very close, but the gentleman did not see anything bad in this. On the contrary, Lexi was glad that everything was fine with his beloved. The next morning, when the girl had just gotten up, she accidentally met an unfamiliar lady. This girl's name was Violetta Viv. It turned out that Eddie was sent to the squad, so from that day on, she would be the one helping the lady. As soon as the main character of this story heard that Maximus was already in the squad, the lady began to worry, because earlier Lexi said that they were almost finished. The girl's anxiety told her that this was all because of what happened yesterday. Tracy assumed that Eddie could be very angry with the lady. Besides, the heroine was surprised why the mister didn't say anything about the replacement. But it's not that she didn't like Violetta. The girl was just offended that the knight left without saying goodbye properly. In fact, the guys serving were informed about the change only in the morning, because it was simply too unexpected. There was no time to explain everything to the lady. Meanwhile, the situation in the house of that same boy was not right. A menacing man, John's father, shouted that the woman had been cured by a priest with money that he had hidden secretly from his relatives. Of course, the young man did not know the whole truth, since his mother had promised not to tell anyone about Tracy's magic. But this silence only angered the man even more. Moreover, at that moment, the very same duke to whom the servant had promised payment came into the poor family's house. Since there was no money now, all the father could do was ask for mercy and mercy from his master. He fell to the floor, knelt down, and immediately began to bow to the floor in front of the mister. At this time, the senior nobleman noticed that the boy's mother had stopped limping and now the girl looked quite healthy. That is why he thought of taking this woman with a small child as collateral. And that's how it all happened. Soon the guy ordered the woman and the boy to be taken away from here. In addition, he deliberately separated the family. The master also added that his slave should not dare to show his face until he returned all the money. The punitive expedition was over. The atmosphere in the city was still tense, but the landowner Kaka decided to throw a banquet in gratitude for the service. And although the hike was already coming to an end, Tracy was primarily worried about the fact that Eddie was still nowhere to be seen. Lexi said that he had given him a secret mission, so the girl even thought that Maximus was simply avoiding her. Luckily, at that very moment, the girl still accidentally met her temporary bodyguard. The lady immediately noticed the paleness on the guy's face and suggested out loud that the secret mission was very difficult. But there was no mission, which the knight decided to admit. In response, the young lady asked him why Maximus had never approached her during this time. It turned out that after His Excellency told the knight to join the squad, the work became too hard, so the warrior simply did not have free time to meet with Tracy. And although the campaign was already over, just in case, a couple more guys were sitting in ambush in the forest in case the dark forces appeared. In general, the most important thing for the girl now was that Eddie was not angry with her at all. It turned out that, in turn, the guy thought that it was the lady who replaced him with a new guard. Of course, His Excellency did it personally because of his stupid jealousy. Since the boys had now figured out that they didn't hold a grudge against each other, Tracy offered Eddie to become her bodyguard again. But first, she had to get approval from His Excellency himself. The landlord Hawk returned to the chambers with Lexi. As soon as he noticed the dark-haired girl, he was convinced that the rumors about Iz were true. It turns out that the leader received an official letter from the imperial family, and the lady's beautiful facial features were hard to miss, so he immediately recognized the young lady. Because the man didn't know that Tracy's origin was currently kept secret, he spoke about it so calmly. But as soon as Lexi asked him to be more tactful, he immediately realized everything. Then he promised to drop by the guys tomorrow, hoping to hear an answer to his request. But the Count insisted that his answer had not changed. When the landowner left, the girl decided to inquire what kind of request it was. It turned out that the landowner had simply asked Count Spare to stay in Hack for a little while longer. At that moment, Eddie, who was watching the guys from the side, shouted at the top of his voice, sharing his observations. The guy simply noticed a special bracelet on the gentleman's wrist. Immediately after, Maximus told His Excellency that being overprotective was bad, because it would make one think that he didn't trust people. By the way, the young man also added that from tomorrow he will again be Tracy's bodyguard. He and Violetta will guard the lady in shifts. As soon as the energetic guard finished saying everything he wanted, the prince immediately decided to tell the girl that he trusted her. In response, Lady Tracy also added that she trusted her companion, Lexi. On such a pleasant note, their evening came to an end, and now it was time to go to bed to rest before tomorrow. The banquet hall at the Hawk landlord's villa was filled with many guests on the day of the banquet. However, most of them were not even aristocrats. Tracy did not expect to see common people here, even though the seats were clearly separated. While the girl was having a snack, her bodyguard announced that His Excellency would be arriving soon. Eddie also decided to ask the princess if she was okay after that incident. And although the girl was completely fine, the guy still warned her that she shouldn't use her power so carelessly, because the young man listened that Iz's power also has its limits. Of course, it's all the fault of this damn book, which constantly tests the limits of the mistress. Today, the textbook haunts Tracy all day. Good thing that, in any case, only the girl sees it. Every time no one can see this book, the main character of this story realizes that she does not belong here. So she still feels lonely. And yet, this is not a reason to constantly fall into despondency. At that moment, the lady noticed a guy she didn't know. She decided to ask Eddie who he was. The knight told her that the blonde man was a young gentleman, the son of the landowner Hawk. When the gentleman approached the miss, the lady also decided to say hello and introduce herself as Tracy Spur. But immediately in response, the guy noted that the girl had a different pedigree. He indicated her real last name, Iz. Immediately after, the heroine assumed that he apparently also received a letter from the imperial family. And yet, the girl considered it ignorant to talk about it in such a public place. Moreover, the guy unexpectedly added that he heard about how the lady cured a sick woman. In any case, the gentleman was even glad that a respected guest visited their house. The guy also added that he hoped that the lady would like everything here. Although, to be honest, it seemed to him that their cooks did not have enough skills to please a commercial guest. Then he found fault with the food that Tracy had not finished. It was hard to guess that he was simply making fun of the fact that race and minorities live in abundance and luxury. He was deliberately getting on the girl's nerves to find out something. But the lady, in order not to start a conflict, simply said in a sweet tone that she had not managed to eat everything. Well, the young master still had some unfinished business. So in the middle of the conversation, he apologized for leaving so suddenly and disappeared from sight. As soon as the impudent fellow left, Eddie asked the lady to stop constantly tolerating such ignorant types. It is not permissible to think of this as something self-evident, because the princess is simply not the kind of person who deserves such treatment. Although the lady admitted that all the Duke's words were true, since she was not a citizen of the Empire, but the bodyguard dared to return her. While Prince Spare was her patron, disrespectful attitude towards the girl was equal to disrespect for His Excellency. In addition, the knight reminded that he was at the Miss's disposal, and if some boor appeared again, Madame could boldly challenge him to a duel, and Eddie's bodyguard would become a shield and sword for Tracy. While Eddie was assuring his mistress of his fidelity, the lady noticed someone treating the baby roughly. Among the crowd of visitors, the girl recognized the familiar image of John. Of course, Tracy immediately thought of approaching the boy, but Maximus stopped her. The guy asked her to pretend that the lady did not know the child, otherwise she would have to justify herself to the young master. Time flew by rather quickly, and the main part of the banquet had already begun. The greeting of His Excellency, the Crown Emperor Lexi Spare, The guy was introduced as the ripe Duke of Spare, who had provided great assistance to Haku by organizing the squad. The landowner said that if it were not for this man, their city would have suffered great damage and sincerely thanked the prince. At that moment, the owner of the palace also wanted to introduce another guest. As soon as the man finished speaking, the lady seemed to feel an unpleasant anxiety inside herself. It turned out that her anxiety was not just like that. A second later, the manual told that the landowner Hawk was under the influence of an evil dragon. The man then began to announce that among the guests there was one of the representatives of the Is race who possessed healing powers. And then, without any hesitation, he introduced Ms. Tracy to the public. All the visitors immediately began to talk among themselves, discussing whether Mr. Hack's words were truly true. After all, people knew that they had previously said that their entire family had been exterminated. People who immediately decided to demand help from the princess with holy powers also made themselves known. "Help! My baby is dying, and I have a sick mother. My daughter can't get out of the hospital bed. Please show mercy." Literally, every second person immediately began to cry out. Eddie's bodyguard immediately decided to stand up for the lady. The knight demanded that everyone step back, and if anyone came closer, he would use his sharp sword. At that moment, the book announced that all the people in this room were currently under the influence of an evil dragon. The angry crowd was going to do harm as soon as possible. But what should the main character of this story do now? How should she act in such a terrible, difficult situation? All her lover could advise her was to run away from here as quickly as possible. The guy asked the girl not to worry, and also told Eddie to put down his sword and prepare to retreat. Lexi explained that it seemed that the landowner Hawk was trying to use a stupid trick to keep them captive. It turns out that the dragon can influence people too. Even Lexi guessed that absolutely everyone here is susceptible to evil influence. The gentleman also noted that only the highest-ranking knights could deal with evil, and that it would be difficult for ordinary people to cope. Therefore, if Maximus and Tracy did not want to suffer, they should stay away. Afterwards, the most powerful warrior of the Empire, Adam, realized that it was necessary to find the source of the evil forces. Lady Tracy then asked the boys to look at the landowner Hack, as she felt that he was the source. At the very least, the man was giving off a purple aura, just like the one she had felt earlier from the evil dragon. As soon as the girl made her remark, she asked Eddie to calculate the route to the man. Of course, it is possible to do this, but it is too risky. Besides, Lexi believed that the most important thing was to keep Tracy safe. So at first, he suggested taking the girl away from here. But during this, the book said that if Miss left this place like this, then Hack would fall under the control of an evil dragon, and the complexity of the plot could increase in the future. If this were to happen, it would be even more difficult to correct the consequences, and the entire city would be completely exposed to the forces of evil. In addition, it was difficult to predict when the malice that had been intensified by the landowner would return. Therefore, it was necessary to act immediately. When the man was about to take the miss away, the girl stopped him. She immediately explained that if the landowner interfered with them, it would be difficult to leave Hawk safely, and then suggested the best option: cleanse the source of evil, the landowner. In response, Lexi tried to assure the girl that he would have time to do everything, but only after he took the young lady away from here. However, the princess still insisted that it would be too late by then. The more time passes, the harder it will be to clean it. The forces of evil are already visible to the naked eye, which means they don't have much time left. If they drag it out any longer, it will be difficult to change anything. This is what the lady was trying to convey. Luckily, the man actually listened to her words. Plus, Eddie told them that they still had one air-cleansing stone left. Lexi extended his hand so that the assistant would hand over the trophy to him. The man promised to sort everything out, and in return, the bodyguard and the lady were to hide in a safe place. But then, a young gentleman, the son of the man who had started the evil's absorption of everything around him, blocked their path. The young gentleman pointed out that there was no need to try to cleanse the area's aura. The gentleman also added that he really wanted Iz to stay in their city for a little while longer. To motivate the girl to listen to his instructions, the guy decided to blackmail her with the poor baby. The young lady knew that the mother of this child was limping, but strangely enough, the crippled body returned to normal in just one day. The gentleman understood that the visiting guest would not simply deny that she had performed a miracle. Moreover, the poor baby's biological father, since he was in a critical financial situation, begged his son to tell the evil uncle the whole truth, to admit that it was Iz who had cured his mother. But the main character of this story simply could not so easily admit that she was a healer, so she simply denied everything that Papa John said. Then it turns out that this guy lied to me so as not to return the money. Hak's son pointed out in response. The child's father immediately tried to convey to the man by shouting that the girl was lying. But the cruel master no longer planned to spare him. He immediately ordered the guards to cut out the commoner's useless tongue. The time to choose has come. Since the situation was tense, the system stopped in time. A new event appeared. Based on this, the guide asked to choose one of the proposed options. Then the story will change depending on the choice of the main character. The choice made earlier can no longer be changed, so the book advised to choose wisely. So, what about the choice? First, deny the use of force until the end and immediately leave Hawk. Second, fulfill the landowner's request, and then safely cleanse Hawk. Third, pretend that the healer is listening to the landowner's request, and then immediately carry out the cleansing. The allotted time for the choice is 1 minute. How strictly fate ruled over other people's lives. This book does whatever it wants.